the players that were here when you arrived were in a system that didn't use a lot of multiple sets or disguise schemes the way you normally like to do. How has that group handled this change? And with that background, does it impact how quickly and how much you install with what you want to do defensively?
Well, first off, the things that they did last year, I thought were very helpful to the things we're doing, and we may, we're adding a few things here and there, but nonetheless, the experience of those things are things that a lot of teams play, and we'll use them as well. So that there's a lot of carryover in that regard. Outside of that, there are some new things we're doing, but I think that's the case for any time you bring in a new staff. Everything from language to the way we align, things like that. But I think they're picking up very well. Guys are doing a good job. There's a tremendous amount of great energy, and I'm sure they had that great energy before. Not just because we're here, but I think that's just the makeup of the players that we have. But they've been very receptive to things we're doing, and we're making some progress. But obviously, it's real early, and we've just got a little time to get ready.
Mike, you're not old by any stretch of the imagination, but as a slightly older coach, did you consider opting out? Is it something you might still consider, and can you walk us through that decision-making process if there was much to it?
Opting out? You'll have to explain to me. I'm not following you.
Just deciding not to coach, staying away because of COVID, et cetera.
Oh, well, the reason I answered it that way is because I really never even thought about opting out myself. I thought that was just a player's, option, but I never saw it as a coach's option. I guess it is, but I did not. No. We all face this thing a little different, but no, really, to answer your question, I did not, but I'm very respectful of those who did, and I understand because everyone's different, built different. Some people are more susceptible than others, even. So it's that's really all I got on it.
Why do you like Leighton a little more?
I'm sorry, I've got two on you. We'll get them both. Go ahead. Somebody go again.
The defensive line might be one of the places where there's been the most turnover from last year. Talk to us about the defensive line guys you've got in there and what you see from them.
We've got, we've got good numbers, but we also, as you well know, we had some acquisitions in the offseason to add to the current roster that we have. The guys that were here, some of them were injured. Tyrone Crawford's an example of that. So we got some guys back that they weren't able to play with a year ago. But very excited about the group. We've added some talent, some outside guys, as I stated. And we're just trying to get together, mold them together right now as it is. It's really important to play together as a unit, in particular on the defensive line, just as well as an offensive line, because the coordination is important to the success of the defense, whether you're pass rushing or whether you're stopping the run. And that's guys playing together and getting to know one another. You can assemble a lot of good players, and really what you have is an assembly. But until they play together, you really don't create that team that you want in the trenches, and that's really what we're going through right now. But definitely a good unit. We were very disappointed to lose McCoy the other day, but we have some good young players, and it'll be somebody else is going to get an opportunity that they may not have had as early as it is.
What were some of the things that you saw from DeMarcus Lawrence that you'd be able to use him in a stand-up role, and what's the biggest transition for him as he goes into that playing some in a stand-up role outside a little bit?
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say his primary role will be probably in a three-point stance. That's what he's done very well, and he'll continue to do that. But there are a few things that we do that'll allow him to stand up, and I think it's to an advantage of an experienced player who understands formations and tendencies and things like that, because standing up, obviously, you can see a lot more of the offense than you would with your hand in the dirt. So there's a little bit of an advantage for some players to do that. But there are times when it's everything to get off the ball as quickly as you can and rush the passer. And obviously, D-Law is very good at that, and he'll continue to do those things. But like I said, I think standing up here and there for a few things is really just gives him an opportunity to kind of survey, what it looks like around him, and maybe have a better feel for what they're going to do, so he can attack it that much better. But so anyway, that's kind of what and a lot of our ends will do the same thing. There's opportunities for them to kind of stand up and see things a little with a wider range of view than they normally would have.
But what do you like about Leighton in the middle and Jalen outside to fit your scheme?
That's a great question because I think both of them have great versatility and flexibility to play both positions. I felt like it was a good decision to try to protect Jalen just a little bit more in some of the blocking scheme things. Not because he needs it, but more because I thought that because of the size thing with Leighton, that taking on people maybe be a little strength. But I've got to be honest with you. Thus far in training camp, I mean, they both could play either position, which they did a year ago. And I think going forward, they'll just get better and better at the position they're going to play and continue to grow in that regard. But they're both, they've both got flexibility to do either job. And I think when they both lock into, those things that they have to do at the position, it'll, bode well for them and us as a defense.
What were your thoughts on you guys adding Everson Griffin, and just what does he bring to your guys' defense?
I'm very excited about Everson being here. He is. I've watched him from afar, naturally, as many people have, and he's a very good player. He's a playmaker. He looks to be. He's a very well-prepared player for the game, so he's a pro. Naturally, anytime you get a veteran that's carries himself like a pro in preparation and everything, it helps our younger players. So you get more out of it than just his individual play. You get that how he rubs off on the younger guys. But like I said, his play speaks for itself. He's been very productive and a very good NFL player, and we're certainly excited to have him to strengthen our defensive line.
What have you seen from Aldon Smith here earlier, especially since he's had a prolonged absence from the NFL and just kind of where he is in his comeback?
Well, the first thing is when you see Aldon, he's an awesome sized guy. He's a big man. He's very impressive. But thus far, I like the way Aldon, number one, interacts with the other players personally, to be honest with you. I mean, he's a team player. He's got a lot of personality. I like the way, like I said, I like the way he interacts with D-Law, with Tyrone Crawford, with a number of guys. I see that that chemistry that's so important to come together, not only in defensive line, but as a defense. I like the way he adds to that group. And so that excites me. Outside of that, as a player, he's got versatility as a big man. A lot of times, obviously, you're just more entrenched, with your hand in the dirt and doing those things. But he's another guy that can stand up and move around. He played outside linebacker for the few years he was in San Francisco, and so he understands standing up and putting his hand in the ground. But he's a good player. Look, he moves very well. He's dominant. He's long. He's from a physical standpoint, there's really not a whole lot of limitations. He understands football very well. But again, getting back to the first thing I said, just as a person and the way he interacts with the other players, in particular in the defensive line, is probably the most the most telling story and the thing that's probably as important as anything we'll do, and that's get the chemistry together in the process of learning our jobs as defensive players.
What's most important for you to do with him after 5 years away from the game to make sure that he's ready to go?
Say it one more time, please. I'm sorry. The question one more time.
What's the key to making sure Aldon is ready for game day after 5 years away?
The key to making sure he's ready, I would say it's the same as all of them for that matter, and that is, number one, we got to be get in shape and make sure we're in good shape before the first game. There's a limited amount we're in pads for about I guess 14, 15, however many we had before the first game, and those padded practices are very important to get guys in the used to hitting each other for that matter. But I think that's really important because that's a big part. We won't be tackling much for that first group. If we do, it'll be a little bit here and there. I think Coach McCarthy will have some drills for that, but where every team's going to go into the first game with a little bit of an unknown from the standpoint of hitting one another, because obviously it's very limited this year before we get into our first game with no preseason games and things like that. But I believe our entire football team will be ready when that time comes. But we do have a couple more weeks to continue to work on that.
How was the off season and communicating with your guys in these unique circumstances? Did you find yourself kind of embracing the technology and the other hoops you had to jump through to do that?
To say the least, I don't only think that we did, but I think everybody in the world had to get used to that type of the changes that were made. But yeah, the virtual meetings early on, there was some glitches here and there and some difficulty on both sides, whether it was the IT side or just the side of us coaches trying to communicate with our players in that regard. But it was, we got a lot out of it. Looking back on it, we got an awful lot out of it, to be honest with you. So it was very useful, and I'm glad we did it, because had we not done it, we would really be behind at this time getting into training camp. But our players, probably the biggest thing that I noticed at this time right now is how involved our players were in it and how much they got out of it, because we're going through an installation now, which we typically would have been through twice and in a practice form, and all we did was meet and talk about things one time through before we got to training camp. And so that's very limiting compared to, like I said, what you've done in the past. But our players did an excellent job on their own. They've got the iPad, so they're able to watch cut-ups and film of the things we were going to do. But they were not able to do any of those things as a unit until we got here in the office just a week to 10 days ago. And so, like I said, it was very beneficial for us, and a lot of credit goes to the players and the time they put in on their own, not just in the meetings with us, but in the time they did on their own to prepare for training camp, so that when they got here, it certainly makes for a faster learning curve than it would have been.
Mike, what are your early impressions of Trayvon Diggs, and also just the numbers that you have at cornerback? Just your thoughts on that competition and trying to settle on a rotation there?
My first impression on Trayvon is, well, like I said, most impressions are just personal when you get him, and he's a very good person, very respectful person, takes coaching very well. He's an intelligent guy. He listens well. He's getting a lot of individual attention from Al Harris, our corners coach. And when Al's got tremendous experience at playing the position, he played at a high level for many years. I think that's a great match for one. But like I said, he's very interested in learning and getting better, and so from that standpoint, he's doing a really good job. From that point on, I tell you, one of the things that'll make a big difference for all of our secondary players is just the people we're going against. I mean, we've got as good a wide receiver core, I'm sure, as throughout in the league. And that helps your players. That helps your young players as well as your older players, because the competitiveness that they face every day in practice makes them better. And that's as big a plus for that unit as we have. It's just the competition in practice every day. As a group, the secondary, I would say it's. I think you asked about the cornerbacks. I don't know if it was a depth question or what, but naturally, you always want as many corners as you can find, to be honest with you. You'd love to have a bunch of them, but I think we've got a good quality group, and I think we've got some depth at the position. As you already mentioned, somebody like Trayvon Diggs would be nice if he can come on. The sooner he comes on would add some quality depth at the position, and we need guys like that to step up. But you always need a number of corners, because nowadays you have basically base defense is what used to be called nickel and sub, and we have 5 DBs on the field most of the time, and because of that, usually at least 3 of those 5 will be corners, and 2 deep makes 6. And if you kind of look at most rosters, if you've got 6 quality corners, which in the past everybody's just hoping to have 3 or 4, but if you've got 6, you can make it through the season. So depth is important at that position. But I think we've got a good group. They work hard, and we'll see in the next 2 weeks who gets better.
Mike McCarthy was on your staff in San Francisco, and I was just wondering, being back with him with the roles reversed, what's that like, and what's his best trait as a coach?
I love Mike. I think of Mike as a brother. He's an extremely good head coach. Every day, when he's in front of the team and all, it's I get a real, I was going to say I get a kick out of watching him, but it's really not a kick. I'm glad I'm working for him. I really am. I think he does an outstanding job. He does as good a job in front of the football team as any head coach I've ever been associated with, and I've been with a few Hall of Famers, as a matter of fact. He just does a great job. I think he's very down to earth. He's very real. I think the players can relate to him. He talks their language. He's very straightforward. He tells it like it is. He doesn't, beat around the bush. Corners. He's got a great plan. He's very successful. I mean, there's a ton of great things about Mike McCarthy, and to be honest with him, I'm enjoying this as much as any time I've ever coached. He's got a great staff. He's surrounded himself. There's a bunch there's a bunch of things that not only Mike himself has, but the people he surrounded himself that we're all working together, towards a common goal. It's a joy. It's a pleasure to do. But, it's, as far as him working for me before and me working for him now, I don't think, but I care a lot about Mike, and I'm really enjoying working for him.
What was the conversation like when Mike asked you to join his staff, and how long did it take you to make that decision, given how highly you speak of him?
Well, first off, it took me about 1 second to say I'd love to come on board. Like I said, I've known Mike. I've had a great amount of respect for Mike. I will say though, that since he left, we've just had sparingly conversations, not very often, but again, when you work together for a full year and go through the things we did that 1 year, there's a closeness, there's a bond that I think you have for a while. Whether you ever come back together and work with each other again, sometimes happens, sometimes it does not in the NFL. But this one did happen, and I was extremely excited for the opportunity. I was excited that he would want me to be on his staff. He had a lot of choices of people he could get, and everyone, there's not a whole lot of people that would turn down an opportunity to work with Mike. But like I said, I'm excited about it and looking forward to having success here.
Thank you.
All good?
Do you,
Go ahead.
Can I ask
One
one
more
more?
and we go. Yeah. Go ahead.
With you and Kellen in a day-to-day back and forth in practices, do you guys kind of match up with each other beforehand to say what you're going through, or do you kind of want to keep that stuff to yourself so you can see how each other responds, and maybe that helps your players too, that everybody's got to kind of think on their feet quicker than knowing what's coming on the script?
Great question. What we typically do, and a lot of teams do, is the offense sets the personnel and the play just like it would be in a regular game. And then the defense is handed the script, but we don't have the play on it. All we have is the personnel and the information of down a distance that you would typically get in a game and not know the play. And then we just apply our defenses, and that's pretty much how we do the entire thing. And I'd be honest with you, I don't really want to know the play because it doesn't do us any good. We want to be challenged by the best plays that we can see against the defenses, in particular when you're in practice, so you can get things identified before you get into the game situation. The place I just came from, one of the things I did is we basically did say, hey, here's all the coverages, and put them on there with the hopes that the offense at times, and they would change certain plays to make a better play against the defense that we had. And it was really just to help us out because we wanted to, we wanted to get challenged with the plays that they thought were best against the defenses that we had. So in practice, you like to see your team compete, your defense or your offense compete against one another at a high level, but I think you're best served when you let them just face how it comes, and some situations are better than others, but that's much like what a game is too.
Thank you.
Thank you.